Hello everyone, welcome to a video on 4.4 economic integration. Today we're going to look at what economic integration is, why we would want to do it, and why we would not want to do it. So broadly, it's the unification of economic policies through the reduction or removal of tariffs and other trade protection methods. Now I think using the idea of states and countries can help us understand this concept. So Australian states, we do have unified economic policies. We don't have tariffs or quotas that restrict trade between states. We've got a common currency, the dollar, a central bank, and we even have a shared federal government. What we need to understand is the more economically integrated countries become with each other, the more they start to act like one country. We're going to look at the different levels of integration. So from top to bottom, we have the least integrated to the most integrated. The monetary union, that's really the most economically integrated countries can be without actually forming one country. We'll start with free trade agreements. An agreement between countries that gives special or favorable terms and conditions of trade to the member countries. Now, there are a few types of these. So we can have bilateral agreements. For example, the China-Australia Free Trade Agreement. Australia have free trade agreements with around 10 different countries. There are also regional free trade agreements. So NAFTA, North American Free Trade Agreement, between the US, Mexico, and Canada, where they all agree to lower their trade barriers. And lastly, a multilateral agreement. This is reached between all members of the World Trade Organization, which is over 160 countries. Now, a final point to make about a free trade area, it's a group who come under the free trade agreement, is that they're all free to make agreements with any other country. So they're not locked in to a partnership with certain countries. They're free to make multiple agreements with different countries. That last point is important because a customs union is the next level of integration. This is where they agree to liberalize trade, make it more free, but they also adopt a common tariff to non-members. So they all treat other countries the same, right? They act as a group when they negotiate with other countries. So one example here is the Southern Africa Customs Union, South Africa, Botswana, Lesotho, Namibia, and Swaziland. They have to act as a group. So Australia, for example, cannot reach a free trade agreement with one single member. They can either reach a free trade agreement with the whole lot of them, all five, or none. That's what that means. Okay, and then next is a common market. This is quite a bit more integrated. So they've already got all the conditions of a customs union, plus they eliminate any barriers to trade between those countries. So there are no barriers. A customs union can still have some low barriers between them. They've just agreed to lower them. A common market has no barriers. And importantly, they also have free movement of factors of production, which means no restrictions on labor, capital, or land purchasing, for example. The EU is the best example of this. What this labor mobility means is that a person in Spain, they're free to move to Belgium to live and find work with zero restriction. Now, we're going to look into why we would want to do these. So what's the advantage of being in a trading bloc? You get access to a larger market. So a larger market with less protection, that's good. So think of a German company. Rather than just selling without tariffs within Germany, they can sell without tariffs to all of these countries in the EU, right? So this will result in more exports, and we should also see more investment. Firms may need to expand and potentially economies of scale as well. And a large trading bloc also brings in foreign investment. So a US or Chinese company, they have a huge incentive to set up an operation in the EU. If they produce within the EU, they don't have to deal with any trade protection either. They're free to export to all of these other countries. And of course, that's going to lead to economic growth. These things, exports, investment, they're going to lead to growth. Next, increased competition. With no trade barriers, only the most efficient firms will survive. This incentivizes firms to be as efficient as possible. And this leads to benefits such as lower prices for consumers and also efficiency in the allocation of resources. What else do we get? We get increased employment opportunities. So in a common market, which is a pretty integrated level here, there are no restrictions on the movement of people. So you might be in a country with, that's weird. You might be, why is that happening? You might be in a country with high unemployment. So your opportunities are lesser. But what that means is that you are free to move where the jobs are. So you just hop on a train, drive to another country, and where the jobs are, you can go there. You don't have to go through that long visa process at all. Trading blocks also have advantages in that they have significant power in these multilateral negotiations. So within the World Trade Organization. So what can happen is that other countries know that nothing will pass without satisfying all of those European Union countries. So countries within the EU, therefore, are probably more likely to receive what they want. So it's good to be part of one of these blocks. We can also get political stability. Greater economic integration brings greater independence between countries. So that is, they need each other for both imports and as an export market. Many multinationals, for example, have operations in various EU countries. And it is thought that this interdependence, in part explains the lack of hostilities, the lack of war between these countries. And the idea really is that with so many complex supply chains going throughout Europe, these multinationals, different operations, different countries, it is in countries' best interest to cooperate with each other and be civil. So we haven't had the hostilities within those countries, between those countries. On to some disadvantages. There's a loss of sovereignty. So they don't get to make decisions for the best of themselves. So they lose some ability to govern themselves. They may have to choose policies that are best for their trading bloc rather than the best for their own country. One of the reasons that the British voted to leave the European Union was not wanting to be overly dictated to by a central government located in Brussels. So here you can see a sign or a slogan of the former Prime Minister Boris Johnson. That slogan is about let's take back control. We want to govern ourselves is really what they're saying there. I did say there were advantages to being within a trading bloc for multilateral negotiations in the WTO, but critics would say that having large blocks can create trade conflict and can actually slow the process of trade liberalization on a global scale. Large trading blocks may have no barriers within those blocks, and they may have less interest in global free trade because they're getting what they want already. They don't need the rest of the world. They've got their trading bloc. Okay. This can lead to some stalemates in negotiation between the large blocs when they come up against each other. They both have a lot of countries and they can't reach a resolution. Okay, onto monetary unions. So this is really, the best example is the Eurozone in Europe. These are a higher form of integration. So they've got all those conditions of a common market, but they share one currency, the euro. So every country in Europe that has the euro is part of the Eurozone. Because they've got one currency, they have to share a central bank, because a central bank manages the currency. So what happens is they actually give control of their monetary policy to the European Central Bank. There's one central bank making monetary policy, the changes in interest rates on a simple level, for many countries in this Eurozone area. Now, where some students get confused, I want to be clear about this, is who is in the Eurozone. All Eurozone countries are in the European Union, but not all European Union countries are in the Eurozone. So, for example, we know that Britain used to be in the European Union, because that was all through the news. They never had the euro. They always had their British pounds. So we knew they weren't in the Eurozone. They weren't in the monetary union. Lastly, we're going to look at what the World Trade Organization does. Okay, World Trade Organization. What do? They administer multilateral free trade agreements. So they get everyone in the same room, all those 160 plus member countries, and they provide a forum for those negotiations, aiming to reach consensus on how to liberalize trade. Importantly, they make rulings on trade disputes, a significant number of which relate to dumping. All right, that's what dumping is. Now, another key role is that one of their stated aims is to assist developing countries re-trade, to assist them to have more sophisticated trade agreements with other countries, perhaps. We'll see one of the potential problems with that happening. We're going to look at a couple of issues affecting the World Trade Organization. One is their inability to reach consensus on agricultural protections. So the developing world, they arguably need trade protection in order to build their agricultural industries, but the developed world, the rich countries, they heavily subsidize their farming, and they make it nigh on impossible for the developing countries to grow their industries. So they're having trouble reaching consensus on what to do there between all the countries. Another issue is that there is some unequal bargaining power of the members. So unfortunately, we are seeing that the richer countries, the more developed countries, do have more power in getting their things done. Despite one vote, one member equaling one vote, the reality is that it's not really happening. So there is feeling that the World Trade Organization is somewhat ineffective due to this. Okay, thanks. Hope you've taken some good notes and are ready.